and welcome back to another episode of the Real Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jacob O'Connor. Real Conversations is a podcast for those dedicated to doing hard things and living a meaningful life. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Smith. Ryan, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me over here. Your office is beautiful, and I've not had the chance to explore downtown Orlando, so I'm glad I got out here.
Yeah, I'm glad you came. You should stay around.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure. So Ryan, you have an interesting story, and it's not one that I've had a lot of guests on where it's kind of like you can see the sequence and the events in their life, like they become a professional athlete, or it's something that's like very public facing. Whereas I feel like your road to success and things you've done have been a more unique and unconventional route. And so I would love to dive into first what you're doing now, and then kind of where you think your story started off and how you got to here.
Okay. So we own and operate mobile home parks and storage facilities in more than 20 states. And we have a team that helps us do that.
Mm-hmm. So mobile homes is, I would probably call it unsexy.
That's what people think of when they think of me.
Yeah. Unsexy. Oh man.
So that's congruent. Yeah.
How did you get there though?
Yeah. So it was kind of it's kind of one thing led to the next. And it's interestingly enough, the next logical step as presented by the circumstances of the time, then several iterations of that led to this, although it makes no sense, which is the nature of the question, mm-hmm. But kind of working from where we are, I'll kind of jump back in time a little bit. So, and I'll kind of go sequential because you kind of have to, but my my dad was in the real estate business, but not primarily. So he was a copier salesman for, I think it was Konica Minolta or something mm-hmm. like that. So he sold printers and copiers, and to build wealth for the family, we schlepped on the weekends, and he would buy rundown properties in rundown areas, and mm-hmm. we would help him fix it. So trench and scrape and all of those things. And I loved to work. And so as I got older, and I'm talking about 8 to 10 years old, I started to learn to code. So I taught myself to code starting at 8. Saw a computer, had to know how it worked, and I can walk you through how I did that. It was kind of an interesting way I did that. But anyway, started to learn to code. I would write software for pretty much anybody I knew. I'd go to a business and see a problem that software could address, and I'd go home, consider it a challenge, write a software application, put it on a disk, bring it to the business owner and say, this will fix this, that, and the other. So I saw my dad as an opportunity because my dad was really bad at financial modeling, forecasting, kind of analytics. And so I ended up spent a whole summer, almost 4 months, locked myself in the room. He didn't know it. And I coded an application for him that allowed him to basically financially analyze and evaluate his investments without the need for me. I guess for me, I wanted the opportunity to leave the house one day. So selfishly, I was trying to code an out for myself. But so I coded this application, so ended up getting about 100. I showed him, he liked it. He showed a friend who liked it, a couple friends who liked it. And I ended up having over many years over 100,000 users of my software globally.
How old were you?
Oh, it was a teenager. So I had, and it got really funny because in college, I played baseball in college, got drafted by the Orioles and the Angels, played baseball all the way through college. I'll never forget this one game I went to. I was pitching, and I had just shipped off an order of software. And I think I can't remember, but it was probably $100,000 worth of software that I invoiced for. And, I was just sitting there at the game, just having made $100,000 on an order, and I think my coach was making $60,000 to $70,000 a year at that time. It was just wasn't arrogant, or like from that point of view. It's just I was grateful. Like it's just unbelievable.
Was it a goal for you to try and make money, since you said you didn't grow up necessarily having a lot of wealth, or was that a byproduct of just your curiosity?
I would say it's never really been about the money per se. It's always been about the curiosity. And even with my kids, I've got 4 young kids, I challenge them to do things, and then they'll do it. They'll surprise themselves. And my refrain is always, I wonder what else you can do. And so that's kind of kind of the way I looked at myself is like, I wonder what else I could do, you know? And so, yeah, it's more just the curiosity.
So there's a couple things that I know you're probably a quarter of the way through that sequence of that journey, but I want to.
You hope. I'm teasing.
Makes for a good episode. I want to stop along the way though and say, sure. You discovered at a young age you love to work, and I'm curious about why that is and what that meant to you in your head.
Yeah, no, I think work is such an honorable thing. I don't think there's any kind of low work. I think all work is God given. It's, you know, I'm a Christ follower, and in the Bible, before, you know, the biblical account in Genesis, before sin entered the world, work was a commandment. So, you know, as a believer, work is not a byproduct of a fallen world. It was actually part of a perfect world. And so work is not a result of bad. It was designed for good. And so I think we are all made to work. I think we get a lot out of work. And it wasn't that intellectual at a young age. I just really loved to work.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
I was going to say, is that the conceptualization you had as a kid, or was that a realization later in life?
Yeah, over my life, I've realized that to be true, and some of that was probably taught by my parents. But no, I love to work. I loved digging, carrying heavy things, getting sweaty, looking at the finished product, seeing the transformation. It was just, I don't know. It was not only just the rental properties. My family owned Vietnamese restaurants. A whole nother story. We also owned pizza restaurants. So, I mean, I was always, I was always working somewhere, doing something. I loved it.
For me, it's the feeling of progress. Like whenever I think about work, it's like seeing that I have made progress in one area. I'm slightly better than I was yesterday. Like that feeling to me is the best thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. But for me, it's also, I would say more external. Like I loved the people. Like I loved serving people. I loved, like at the pizza restaurant, I loved doing the best job I could. It's such a, and in the restaurant business, It's such a real way to serve people in a meaningful way. So I always really liked doing my best for other people and giving them my best. So that was always there.
Yeah, I love that. So you're in college. You're at almost what seems like a golden handcuffs crossroad where you've been drafted by 2 MLB teams, and you also just made $100,000 in one day. What was going through your mind at this time?
Yeah, no, it was, and nothing. I would say it wasn't necessarily a crossroads in that it was just more of a point of gratitude. It was just surreal. Sitting here playing a game as a 20-year-old, having just, billed $100,000 for which I'd be paid, for which my cost of goods was probably $500. And just looking around saying, okay, my college coach who's, we were a really good school, he's one of the best, and I think he made $60,000-$70,000 that year. So just being grateful for the opportunity that I felt like I had amongst my peers, amongst those older than me. It was just I was reflective in that moment. It just always stood out to me.
Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so I ended up graduating from college. I had an option and a choice to basically play baseball or pursue business. It was kind of a brains versus brawn kind of crossroads. Yep. And I don't want to say I chose brains because anybody who knows me who might listen to this would just fall out of their chair laughing. But I went the business path. So I had the software application that I had built. I was making pretty good money off of it. And so Jamie and I, my wife and I, we were dating at the time, but I convinced her to not to go become a lawyer and to start a business with me.
That's bold.
It is. I always had this weird thing. I always wanted to build a business with my spouse. It's really strange. And she believed me and trusted me. And so we set off to kind of do that. And so we started buying single family houses right off the bat. We bought, probably 30 or so homes, long-term, buy them, rent them out. And we found pretty quickly a couple of things. One, and this isn't to belittle or denigrate our parents in any way, but we pretty quickly surpassed anything that they had done, which was encouraging, but it's also like, okay, who am I to learn from now? Because there's nobody, that I knew ahead of us at that point. And so we found that the business wasn't that scalable. we thought, you buy 20, 30 homes, margin really thickens, and it really didn't happen. So we were wrong. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't as great as we thought. So we had to decide, okay, is it now 100 homes? Is it 200 homes? Is it 1,000 homes? Or do we try something else? And so that's when we started. We spent a long weekend and we did an analysis of every asset class we could think of. And it was pretty rational process. But we said, okay, we're looking for 4 things. We wanted income, cash flow, capital appreciation, tax benefits, and non-correlation. So if the market goes bananas, as your listeners either now or in the future will learn, markets don't go straight.
No.
They're all over the place all the time. And so we wanted a business that had a good chance of going up no matter what the market did. And so that's where we spent a long weekend. We looked at apartments, mobile home parks, storage, billboards, office, everything. And the 2 that were the most compelling were mobile home parks and storage. And it surprised us because we didn't go in with that thought. And so then we said, okay, well, mobile home parks was the most compelling one of the bunch. And so we went out, didn't know anything about mobile home parks, didn't know anybody who owned mobile home parks. And we went out and bought our first mobile home park.
So before we get into that, I want to take a second and think about this because as I mentioned before this, listeners are younger. They're about my age, right? Mm-hmm. And you said that you and your wife realized you wanted to build a business together. You went out and you bought 30 different single family homes. And it's like, okay, that's easy. Just go buy 30 homes, right? How were you able to do that? Was that from the capital from the software company that you had started? Or I guess maybe something more practical for someone who's younger?
Yeah, it was money that we had saved. It was bank financing. Mm-hmm. We went to every basement seminar, some of them, most of them cheesy, but even the cheesy ones had practical things that I got from it. Mm-hmm. But we went to all these basement seminars and learned everything we could. And there were some interesting strategies on how to buy property with lower amounts down. And so we used some of those tactics and strategies in some cases. But yeah, and it was also not, it was over time. It was over several months. But yeah, no, it was, we took what we had, we stretched it as far as we could go. Mm-hmm. And the thing I would tell your listeners is, you'll never have enough. You never have enough to do all the things you want to do. So you're always constrained. And so that if you're creative and curious enough to figure it out one time, you'll always be constrained again, and creative and curious. And it's an iterative process.
Did you have any fear of debt? I feel like a Midwest traditional value where I grew up in is, you stay away from bank financing unless it's a mortgage on one house, your family home. And talking to Brian Estes, he seems pretty opposed to debt entirely. What was your risk tolerance and thought process behind debt?
So it's actually, I'll separate it because to me, risk tolerance I may have a risk tolerance that's apart from debt in certain segments. So personally, I don't like debt. So I don't like, I think everybody should own or try to own their home without debt. And then you'll get to the point where your friend will come and say, but you can, it's terrible use of money. You should put a loan on it and then go use it over here and buy crypto or, mentioning Brian or whatever it is that they do. And I don't agree with that. I think you should, pay your house off, keep it paid off. I just think the quality of life that gives you is wonderful. But at the same time, from a risk tolerance standpoint, from a business lens, I actually had a stated goal, and this is strange, but to go bankrupt by 30.
Huh?
I wanted to give myself permission. I didn't want to go bankrupt by 30, but I wanted to give myself permission that if I did, because I was striving and trying to do something different and new, that in my mind, if I did that by 30, I still have so much time to learn and grow that it wouldn't have been fatal if by 30. Better by 30 than 40. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to give myself permission to fail. And I failed in reaching my goal.
You failed in reaching your goal, which actually turned out to probably be a good thing.
Correct. That's why it's a weird hack is like I would make my goal failure and then I would fail in failing at it. I would fail it.
I've never heard of something thought of that way.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So why did you do in your head a little analysis or thought exercise of, okay, if I go bankrupt, I can come back from this by doing X, Y, or Z? Because I feel like most people hear bankrupt and they just think oh, it's game over, like Monopoly, you lost.
Yep. No, I just thought the lessons, if that happened, then what I would have learned would be meaningful such that it would never happen again. So either it never happened, or if it did happen, it'll never happen again. And that's, I think that's a pretty bullish case.
Yeah, I'm kind of mind blown right now.
Yeah, so that's the way I looked at it was I'm going to give myself permission because most people, anyway, I have a weird way of viewing kind of fear and excitement. But
I like that though.
Yeah.
I'd love to dive into that. How do you view that?
So in my opinion, fear and excitement are the same physiological feeling. So it's labeled by the brain. And most people label the feeling that is most familiar. So when they're most excited, they often call it fear of failure. So to hack it, I wanted to make my goal failure and then fail in ever achieving my goal.
So then you would feel excitement?
Right.
This is such a different perspective than I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. So let's jump back into starting Elevation Capital, which is the current company that you own and operate right now. Where did that come from and what is the goal here?
Yeah, so to bridge it, so we started buying mobile home parks. We bought 1, we bought 2, we bought 5, I think we bought 10 or so. And then we started realizing the opportunity to buy mobile home parks. We just saw a big opportunity, especially around 2008 to 10, a lot of opportunity to buy good assets for cheap pricing. And again, we were capital constrained. We didn't have enough capital to take advantage of the opportunity we saw. And so we either had to decide to let it go. And specifically, we had, I think it was 6 mobile home parks. I think the asking price was like $4.972 million, I think.
That's pretty specific.
I know. I don't know why I remember that. If that is right, I'm gonna buy myself a cookie later.
There you go.
But I think it was 4.7, let's say, million. And we didn't have the capital to buy all 6, so we were having to decide to buy 1 or 2 or none or. And so we came up with this thought of a fund model. So we ended up forming our first fund, which was a Reg D 506B as in boy offering friends and family. And so we went out and we had never formed a fund, never taken outside capital really. So it was a big deal. And so we were trying to raise $2 million in a year. We raised it in, I think, 4 or 5 months. And it was, literally sitting at the dining room table, starting with A in your phone, saying, hey, it's 2010, we're in the GFC, sky's falling around you. We're 20, 28 and 30-year-olds looking to go buy mobile home parks, and we thought of you, and
you should be honored.
Yeah. And unbelievably, we raised all $2 million. We bought all 6 mobile home parks, and then we started our fund 2, which was I think it was a $5 million raise. Then fund 3, which was a $10 million raise. Then fund 4 or 5, and the last 3 funds alone were almost, what was it? Almost $350 million.
So a couple of things. One, with such a wide array of guests that I have, I want to break down a couple of things for people. The first one being the idea of a fund, which is basically, as you said, you didn't have enough money to go out and do these deals yourself. So you went to people, wealthy individuals, and you said, hey, if we pool your money together with my other friend's money, with my family's money, with my money, then in theory, we'll have enough money to get this deal done. Yep. Would that be an accurate description of a fund? Okay, so that's the first one. GFC, Great Financial Crash. Okay.
Or crisis, yeah.
Crisis,
yeah.
Okay. So when you're going and you're doing a fund like that, like your theory of intertwining fear and excitement of I'm going to fail by 30 and go bankrupt, that works well when it's your own personal finances and your own livelihood that's on the line.
Yep.
And I say that works well. I'm still wrapping my head around that one. Yep. But I don't think you can apply that same theory when it's other people's money now.
No, and I didn't. And I was already on the other side of that. Yeah. No, when you take $1, it's a big deal. A big deal. Yeah.
So how did you feel the added pressure and stress of having other people's money?
For sure. Yeah, it was the most frightening thing I've ever done was raising our first fund. Yeah. It was frightening and just the weightiness of it. And it should be. It's a big, these are, not that if you don't know the people and don't care about them, it matters less. That's not true. But I mean, these are people I knew and thought highly of.
Right.
And still do.
Especially if it's family, because then you're going home for Thanksgiving and you're not just talking about your personal life. You're like, hey, where's my money I gave you? What's going on with that?
It's a big deal.
What gave you the confidence to be willing to accept other people's money with enough of an instinct that you can return them something better than what they gave you?
At that point, we had tested the model on our own money for many, many years. So at that point, I had a lot of my money already at risk in our model. So I felt comfortable about the industry, mobile home parks specifically. I liked the assets. I liked our capabilities and the team. And so there were really no, other than, the potential of what could go wrong. There wasn't specifically anything that we were worried about. So we went forward with it. And it turned out great.
And when you say model, you mean the way that you had done things, your strategy for that investment over and over again, you felt like you'd proven that could work for other people too?
Yeah, the general approach. You buy something for this amount, this is the price, this is the amount of debt, and then on the kind of the cash flow side, here's what your cash flows look like, and the operating expenses and the net cash and the distributions and all of that. Yeah.
So you raised the first fund, and then what were the numbers? Was it 3, 5, 10?
It's like 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, I think 50 million, 122 million, 137 million. And then
what was the time horizon like between each fund?
So initially it was about a year or so, year and a half on average, and then it turned into about 3 years. We decided to move it to about 3.
I think something really tactile for our listeners, especially if they're younger, is they're thinking, how do I get access to this much money, right? Because whenever you're trying to start off, like you said, you don't have the leverage or the financials to go out and do a deal like this. You need to find people that do, that are willing to believe in you. What advice would you offer for someone for either networking or just like having a proven track record to go out and raise money for other folks?
Yeah. So I guess for detail on your question, raise money for other folks or for yourself?
Like what you were doing.
Oh, So, I don't think, interestingly enough, I don't think track record matters less than I think the entrepreneur thinks it does. I think most entrepreneurs question their own viability. They're internal to themselves. So they see their own cracks, their warts. So they buy themselves less than they think other people will. So they undersell themselves. So, I would say, you require a lot smaller of a track record than you think you do to raise capital. If you're an honest, honorable, hardworking, that'll scream and that'll raise capital, even if it's your first deal. So I don't think you need this pressure of building this unbelievable resume before capital will form. But I think having a model, and even a model that you've executed on before, I think that's pretty compelling, especially with your own capital.
So let me give you a hypothetical here, because I think this is good. This is something I didn't realize until a couple of years ago. You always hear entrepreneur, and for me, in the longest time, I thought that was Elon Musk starting Tesla or Mark Zuckerberg starting Facebook. Something that it goes viral and is maybe publicly traded, just something huge. You're an entrepreneur. You started Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, and then I've come to realize that what you're doing is entrepreneurial. It is an entirely unconventional route. And franchising is entrepreneurial. You don't have to have the idea for the unique thing that you're doing, like a social media platform, whatever that may be. You can rather find different ways of making money through investing in real estate or finding something that you like and franchising it. Or there's all these different opportunities. So if you were graduating college tomorrow and you had just went through and you did fine, you got a 3.5 GPA, you scored well, you can read the books and you understand what you did in college, but you don't know what you're going to do next. What advice would you give to someone in that situation?
To me, I think entrepreneurs start young generally. So there's some but I would follow the area of curiosity you have. If you're not curious in any direction, then that's a question without an answer for me.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that because I've never been that. But I would start pulling the strings around the areas that you're curious on. That's what I would do.
Do you go really deep into things, or are you able to shut it off? Does what you're working on, does that come home and it's in the back of your mind running, or have you found a way to shut it off and pause? And
I'm not good at shutting it off. I'm an old programmer. And so, we would, back when I was coding and extensively coding for, 12, 14 hour clips, you'd have this hole in your code. You'd compile the code, you'd get a fatal error. and you just running through the code in your head. You're like, where is it? Where is it? And you debug, and it wouldn't be that helpful, and then usually 2, 3, 4 in the morning, I'd wake up and I'd know exactly where it is. So even while I'm, sleeping, I'm still, but usually when I'm waking up the next morning is when I had the greatest likelihood of finding the issue just through thought.
I think that's an interesting area because you often hear like you need to have balance in your life. And I think it's important to be able to take moments of disconnect and to be with the ones that you care about and to truly like just enjoy a moment. But I think the struggle with high performers is shutting that off and actually letting their brain go to have those moments of peace. I don't have an answer for it. And I'm curious about how you conceptualize that.
I mean, for me, I probably read in it too much, but the people who tell you they need balance, they're telling you that because it's of high importance to them, which means they need the thing they're telling you about and they're projecting. So they're the ones who probably need balance.
That's interesting.
Obviously it's important to them. They're telling you. And so it's not to say balance is important, but I haven't found it. I don't know that I'll find it. I don't know. And to the extent that I do, it'll be an eclipse of the sun. It's just like this brief moment. But it's a fun and constant battle to, to how to be entrepreneur, how to be husband to my wife, who's also co-founder of our business.
That's crazy.
We have 4 young kids, we have, community that we're really big in and really involved in our community. And I mean, it's busy, and that's fine by me. I think it's as it should be for this age.
I think it keeps life interesting. It's not bland. It's not boring.
No.
So what fund are you on now?
So we just finished technically our 9th fund.
Okay. And what was the size of that?
That was a single asset. That was small.
Oh, okay.
We raised, I think about $8 million.
8 million. Okay. So I'm curious, over all these funds, it sounds like they're almost doubling or tripling with each one. How much do you think you've raised to date?
I think it was about 450 million, I would say, something like that.
That's just crazy to me.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, our goal is not, I don't think we'll raise a whole lot more from here. I don't, the goal has never been about more.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we did is we actually went from 1-year funds, we went to 3 years. And so there's things, optically it may look like we're doubling or tripling, but we actually just tripled the time.
So that was going to be my next question actually, is where do you go from here? Like you've already, it seems like objectively had a level of success that most people could only dream about. So where do you go from here? What do you do?
Yeah, it's the fun thing. It's the same. It's like tomorrow, what can I do better than today? That's the challenge. And gratefully, as I look through 24 and even 25, I have more to do, more opportunity to do things better in that time. I think the next 2 years we're going to be slammed, which is fun. So it's not about, when we were, Jamie and I, before we really got started, our goal was to acquire in our lifetime $50 million of real estate, and I mean, we've surpassed that, well, anyway, it's just laughable. So our goal was never about a number, both in making a number or keeping a number, because you can make it. That's one thing, but then the question is, do you want to keep it? Should you keep it?
Yeah.
So it's not about either of those things for us.
So 10 years from now, you're looking out 10 years from now. If things go not to plan, because I don't think things ever really go to plan, but if things go well for you, what does 10 years from now look like in your eyes?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't want to know. That wouldn't be fun. I want to find it out. I'm curious too. So
are you planning goals out like a year out, a month out? I'm just trying to get into your mentality here.
Yeah, I'm not much of a goal setter beyond so we have our business lines, we have budgetary goals, we have things like that. But in terms of the top line of the business, where can it go? We really don't set specifics because it really comes down at the end of the day to opportunity. And if there's an opportunity that presents itself, then we'll grow in response to it. And if there's not, we won't.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the market will hand us as opportunity.
Yeah.
But we're ready to chase it when it comes. So yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard one. But over the last decade, we've bought probably something around $700 million of assets in that decade. So, if the next decade's the same, well, there you go. But also, if that's $2 billion, great. If it's $100 million,
you're just here for the ride,
right? Is that a failure?
No,
no, I don't think so either. So I I don't feel the need to, it's just, there's a lot of ways it could go. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I'm excited too. One thing I'm particularly curious about with your situation is, like I mentioned, a lot of my listeners are younger. They're about my age, right? And you said that it was interesting to you. It was important for you to find a partner who you could go into business with. And I'm curious as to why that is. And then also, it seems like you have a good fit in your wife. I don't know you guys outside of this, but just from reading and the way that you've talked about her, it seems like you guys have been a good fit for each other. What advice would you offer to someone that's younger, that's looking for someone to build with?
It was really sophomoric for me. Going back, I would have done the same thing. I didn't fully recognize all the challenges of working with your spouse, and then that's not critical of her. It's just there, to your point of balance, there is none, because we're at lunch, we're talking about business, at dinner we're talking about business. So finding that separation is a little bit more challenging. And then it's also on the same note, like when you don't have the benefit of being high when she's low or low when she's high. You're usually both high or both low at the same time. And so that's a negative. But at the same time, the way I looked at it, I'm like, if I have this other person I care deeply about and love, then, how much time a day would you want to not see that person? And then if you also thought they were incredibly bright and talented and sophisticated and all these things, why would you want that talent outside of your business?
Right.
And so I just I wanted to build something with Jamie, and she's incredible in every way that I'm not. She's phenomenal. So it's been great. We wouldn't be here without her. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without her. She's been great.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
How did you find that?
Oh man, that's it's God's good grace. I mean, that he made such a person like Jamie in the first place, that he was that creative and inventive. And then he had our paths cross. But no, I met her when I was 10. She was 8.
Oh my gosh. Way back.
Yep. Little League Baseball. She was one of 3 girls that played with the boys. And she's a great baseball player.
What are the odds of that?
Yeah, it's crazy. And then we connected. We lost. So I knew her from baseball. And then many years later, she was my waitress at the Cheesecake Factory. She was working through college and paying her way. And she was my waitress. And it was off to the races.
Oh my gosh. So when you saw her at the Cheesecake Factory, did you think like, all right, I need to ask her out?
So it's funny. I was more direct. So I, the short for your listeners' time, but I was coming from a business meeting. I was by myself. I saw her. We reconnected. I remembered who she was, and I called my mom. I said, "Hey, I just met my future wife."
Oh wow.
And I was dead serious.
Yeah.
And so the whole time I'm like, I now have to grow game, because I had no game. And now I've got to somehow figure out how to ask for a number. And,
Right.
This whole thing, I'm like, crap. So she had she had me, she was taken care of. She had another table of like, I think 16. And so the other table was monopolizing her time by volume. And so I was like, crap. So I just kept ordering. Every time she'd bring an iced tea, I would literally down it. I ordered, so I had 16 iced teas.
Oh my gosh.
I had a salad, a soup, an entree, a dessert. So finally the table left, and I got her to myself. And I invited her out to a church function, took her to her, took her to church, took her to dinner afterwards. And after dinner, I called her up and I just said, and she would tell you this, but I said, I'm interested to know what your intentions are. I have no interest in being your friend. I see something here. If you want to pursue it, then let me know. But I'm not. This
sounds like a business meeting.
I'm not interested in being your good friend. I'm interested in more. And she said she was interested in more. And so we were talking about marriage, I think 2 weeks in.
If 16 sweet teas is not the definition of buying time, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I paid for it.
Yeah. Were you sitting at the table by yourself?
By myself.
Oh my gosh. And you ordered all of that.
Yeah. I was just down in it. Like just, she was the whole time she'd tell you the story from her point of view, but she was just like, man, I'm doing such a bad job. It's just constant, so anyway,
that's hilarious.
Kept getting her back over.
Do you think you're an inherently confident person, or it's kind of bold to call the shot of, is that intuition of that's my future wife, and, being direct of, I have no interest in being your friend. Like all of that to me is like, whoa, that takes a bit of confidence there.
It wasn't confidence, and it wasn't like, that wasn't me. Like, that's not how I walk around and live my life. But at the same time, like in part, it's all to Jamie, not to me. Like the way I felt it, is, I had this, we all have our list of things we want in a spouse, I think. And so I had this list in my head of things I wanted. And so I met Jamie, and in the 5 minutes of talking with her, I'm like, she took my list of 5 and like tripled it. I'm like, what kind of idiot would I be if I was hoping for 5 and I have 15? I'm not going to go try to wait. Well, maybe there's a 25 out there. It's like, no, I'm just 3x'd what I thought was even a dream.
Yeah.
I'm all in. And so I just put all my cards on the table.
Yeah.
And I guess, so that's a lot more about who Jamie is than who I am. But to me, that the way I viewed her was, this is the greatest thing ever invented. Like, I'm an idiot if I don't give everything I've got to pursue her.
You're a businessman. It was a great ROI for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, not even if, I mean, maybe it was, but I was just like, she was and is just unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a couple questions as we start to wrap up here. The first one being, outside of, you said you love to work. Outside of work, what are maybe some of your hobbies? What are some things you enjoy doing?
So I love my kids. Obviously, spending time with my wife. But the kids are a lot of fun. So I sports, coach, those things. But then we do a lot of maker stuff. So we do a lot of, I want my kids to create, not consume. So we do a lot of 3D printing.
That's cool.
Tons of 3D printing, designing, all kinds of stuff. So I like those kind of things. Gardening, anyway, working outside.
That's super cool. 3D printing is awesome. I went to college at Wichita State, and they have one of like the premier state-of-the-art 3D printing labs. They call them maker labs out there just because of all of the aerospace manufacturing they do.
Yep.
The stuff you can do with a 3D printer is absolutely mind-boggling.
It's unbelievable. You walk around my house, and almost everything that's broken and now fixed, we have our calipers, and we measure it, and we design a new model, and we print it. And it's super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So another one of my questions here is, you are obviously a very intelligent person. I'm curious about how you learn. Are you someone who likes to watch YouTube videos? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read books? Or is it just by associating with people that are also smart and you pick it up from them? Or how do you kind of think about that?
That's a good question. I'm more tactile, and I'm a good learner by just being curious and kind of self-teaching, kind of like how I learned to code. That process where it was, I saw it was my first computer. I saw a web page, and I was fascinated. So I figured out you could right-click, save as, and save the source file, the HTML on the desktop. Then you can open that file in the browser and render that in the local browser, and then also open the text file for the code and actually modify the source code and refresh the web page, and it shows you
in real time.
Right. And that's how I learned to code.
Yeah.
As I would that's how I taught myself, is I learned HTML initially just by modifying a file on the desktop and refreshing it in the browser.
That has been one of the most fun things. My buddies and I would always take like websites that are pretty professional, and we'd joke around, and we'd open up the text, and we'd change like the name of the president to the buddy's name, or change the picture to his high school picture, or whatever it was.
It's funny.
It's the best time. That's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. And back in those days there were, and I'm talking, it was, around 1988, 1989, like frames were just the new invention, which frames aren't, now it's iFrame, but frames aren't even used anymore. But it was fun.
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ryan, where can people find you online if they want to connect or learn more about Elevation Capital?
So elevationcapitalgroup.com, or my email is ryan@elevationcg.com, and email me anytime.
Great. You can find the podcast at Real Period Conversations. I'm at Jacob O'Connor. If you guys enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend. It helps us grow. Ryan, my final question for you. Looking back at this really cool journey you've been on, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
I'd say trust yourself, like believe in yourself, and not, like really believe in yourself. Because if you do, it'll give you the ability to take uncanny, unconventional steps forward. Because at the end of the day, if you don't believe in you, who else should?
Do you think that believing in yourself do you feel like you played small in ways whenever you were younger that you didn't believe in yourself enough?
Yeah, there's a lot of there were a lot of things. There were a lot of times where I didn't believe myself, and then there were critical times when I kind of found hacks or found ways to get myself to say yes to things that everything in me wanted to scream no.
Yeah.
And I was grateful on the other side of saying yes. There was a lot of sleepless nights leading up to it. Like one specific, I was 23, and I was asked to give a 2-hour talk about using my software program to 2,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
In Las Vegas. And I was deathly afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
And so I had to give a 2-hour talk in front of 2,000 people. And there were 15 professional speakers. I was the only one who was not professional. And so I was like, they asked, will you do it? And I was like, yes. I knew I should say yes.
Yeah.
I knew it'd be good for me and grow me, but I didn't want to. And I did, and I was the 3rd highest rated speaker of the conference.
Really? So they did a poll on Americans, and it was like, what are you most afraid of? And people ranked public speaking ahead of death.
Yep. Yeah.
That's absurd.
It was awful. I mean, the 2 months leading up were awful.
And you were numbered. So have you done any public speaking since then? Are you still afraid of it?
No, I've done more than my whole, the 10 year. So that set off a whole nother trajectory because it turned out I'm actually really good at it. And I had no idea. And so I ended up giving more than 200 talks between age 20 and 30 to as many as 20,000 people over that decade.
Those reps are invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. I learned a ton through speaking. It was always fun. I always felt like I learned more from the audience than the audience learned from me. Like it was super fun.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.